We want to bring back 9 News legal analyst Whitney Traylor to talk about what happened today. Many people were stressed waiting for this verdict. It was a highly pressurized situation. The evidence seemed to present a clear-cut case to the pedestrian, but as an attorney, weigh in on what you saw and what your concerns were as far as that verdict.
Well, Tom, what I saw as I watched the trial was an overwhelming amount of evidence that showed that Derek Chauvin did, in fact, murder George Floyd. I think the concern was that the defense was focusing on these technicalities. They focused on, previous drug use, his health, things like this. And these were technicalities that had they came back with a not guilty verdict, I think it would have sent a real message, a real discouraging message that what you saw, the evidence that was presented, the doctor's reports was not the case. And so luckily they didn't come back on this technicality, and 10 hours for some may have seemed like a quick verdict, but with this amount of evidence, I'm not surprised that they did come back on a guilty on all three charges.
Whitney, it's the the body camera video, the bystander video. It's made all the difference in some of these cases, especially the one that we saw today. 30 years ago, we saw a video of Rodney King being beaten in Los Angeles by police officers there. This with a different result, obviously, in the ultimate verdict. Do you see differences? Do you see similarities between Rodney King's case and the death of George Floyd?
It's an excellent question, and the comparison is scary in many ways. I remember being a junior at Morehouse College in 1992 and hearing the Rodney King verdict after watching him be tortured for minutes with over 90 hits with the baton, multiple broken bones. And when the verdict came out of a not guilty, I remember walking to campus completely discouraged, once again in tears. We got to campus. The police were nervous. They surrounded us. It was a melee. And the defense in that case, notwithstanding the video, what we saw with our eyes in Rodney King, what the defense did to get the acquittal was that they stopped the video every second or so. And they said, look, Rodney King never complied. He never stopped moving. And so it was a technicality. And here, the defense didn't have much to work with. But again, they were saying, well, it was all these complicating factors. It wasn't the fact that he was on his neck for 3 minutes after he was unconscious. I mean, they even tried to assert that there could have been carbon monoxide from the police vehicle that could have could have been a contributing factor. So there are complete similarities, and the fact that we're now 30 years later and still on pins and needles of whether or not there'll be a conviction in this situation is concerning, but it's also, I think, a sense of justice and a sense that we're moving towards those ideals that this country purports to uphold in its justice system.
Of course, Rodney King survived. George Floyd did not, both caught on video. And now we wait. The pressure of the verdict is behind us. The pressure building towards sentencing now begins. That will happen in 8 weeks. That seems like a long time before they will get to that. Is that somewhat of a standard procedure?
That's fairly standard. There's a lot of moving parts in this case. One of the issues is that there's going to be a number of post-trial motions. In Minnesota, generally the jury will consider, after the trial, they will consider aggravating circumstances to determine if there should be an enhanced sentence. The judge ultimately does the sentencing, but normally it's the jury that does those aggravating circumstances. In this instance, Derek Chauvin waived that right, so the judge is actually going to determine those aggravating circumstances. So he's asked for both sides to brief him, to essentially make their arguments about whether or not, what their respective positions are. And then the judge will ultimately do the sentencing, as I believe he slated it for 8 weeks. So that's not necessarily out of time. And at that point, he's going to have the option of the presumptive sentence or even enhancing, which the prosecution will ask for because of some of the outrageous circumstances, including murdering George Floyd in front of a 9-year-old child.
We will be watching, of course, and we'll be looking to you for some guidance to help us walk through that as we now wait for mid-June and the sentencing of Derek Chauvin, now guilty on 3 counts of murder and manslaughter. Whitney Traylor, thanks as always.